Hey everyone, once again, it's Chris, the Thrift Shop Hustler. Today I got a super amazing interview for you guys and a special guest tonight on a Friday night. I'm here with the King of Thrift, Philip. How you doing, Philip?
I'm good, man. How you doing?
I'm excellent. I'm excellent. Now you're in Texas, correct?
Yes,
Now
yes.
now I was watching like the news and my Yahoo feed today, and is there like some crazy weather going down today?
It is actually today's not too bad. It's about 60 degrees, but the last few days, man, it's been freezing. Down in the 20s, and we've had ice and snow and everything else. And as long as I've lived here, I've never seen snow maybe three times ever. So we don't handle it too well. You know.
Yeah, I'm here in Southern California, and I think the last time it snowed was like 4 years ago, and then the time before that, it snowed for like literally like 20 minutes, and then the time before that, it didn't snow for like 100 years. So
Yeah. Right.
it was
Yeah.
crazy. Well, welcome. I'm glad that you're here. And for everyone that doesn't know, Philip has an amazing YouTube channel, and he is called the King of Thrift. I will put a link down below for anyone that's watching this on the back end. I highly suggest everyone go and check out his channel and subscribe to him. But we're gonna get right into this interview. Philip, you ready, man?
Yeah, I'm ready, man. I just want to let you know, man. I really appreciate you having me on. Having me on your channel. I'm a big fan, man. Been
Oh
watching you
yeah.
for a good while.
Oh, thank you. I really appreciate it. And your channel is awesome too, but we're gonna get right into that.
All right.
So first off, let's just start off with kind of like your history in reselling and like basically a brief kind of bio and what your channel's about.
Well, my channel is, pretty much just like most of the other ones. It's just to, help people. It's mainly geared towards, newbies. People are trying to get started. A lot of people are into clothing, so I do sell clothing pretty much exclusively now. But when I started back in around 1998 or 99, there was it wasn't clothes at all. I did pretty much whatever I could sell, for money. And back then, I was really into like car stereo equipment, big speakers, bumps in the trunks, how I used to be. And, as a matter of fact, in high school, I was sort of the guy that you would come to, if you were looking for anything like that. I bought and sold. And so if anyone was in the market, they came to me pretty much. So that just sort of carried in. After I graduated, I went into sales. I worked for AT&T for a while. And, I did sales there. And my side hustle, back then was a side hustle, but weren't too many side hustles back then. But I was still selling, car stereo equipment and stuff. But, I had always sort of been into thrift shopping, even way back then. I would go there and pick up, furniture for my house and, forks and knives, bowls. I mean, that kind of stuff. I mean, you just get it so cheap there, And, one day my friend showed up at my house and I was working on my stereo in my car and I was pulled out the factory radio in it. And it was a brand new Acura Integra. And he asked me, if I'd sell it to him for like 20 bucks. And back then, I mean, there was no eBay e-commerce, so I was like, fine, that sounds good to me, better than just sitting in my garage. So I sold it to him, and about a week later, he showed up at my house and with a big grin on his face, and told me that he had sold it on eBay for about $150.
Oh man.
And I was a little sore about it, but more than sore, I was pretty much intrigued about the whole thing. So that's pretty much what sparked it for me. I jumped on eBay that night, and it was nothing but a bunch of Beanie Babies, and it was like a sort of just like an online garage sale back then.
Yeah,
And
Beanie Babies definitely made eBay super popular, the whole craze of Beanie Babies.
right, right. And there were a few other things on there, but I just sort of dug into it and checked it out and grabbed a few things from around my house that night and got them listed on. And it was a bunch of stereo equipment, speakers and stuff that I had, and I ended up making like $400 that first week, of just a few things from around the house, and that was it for me. That sort of sparked it, and off I went.
It's a great story, and that pretty much got you hooked, right? That first initial the sales, your first sales.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, because I'd always been, a salesman, and I was always selling and hustling around the school and selling person to person, and people had to find me. So it was going online and selling something was 10 times easier, you know? So yeah, I was definitely hooked after that.
Absolutely. What year did you say you started eBay? Do you remember?
Actually, I said 1999, 1998. It was actually more like probably 2001. Because I remember my daughter was born in 2000 and she had just been born. She was maybe 1 or 2 at the time. And in 2003, I actually went full time, quit my job. So,
Oh, no kidding. So that was actually one of the other questions I was going to ask is if do you do this full time right now? And I guess you're saying in 2003 is when you started doing this full time.
right, right.
So do you want to take us into a little bit of the history of that of how, because like I have a full-time job and right now I love my job and everything. So for me, it'd be hard to kind of to do that. So what was the situation that transitioned you into selling eBay full time?
For me, it was back around that time. Me and my wife it was pretty rocky. And my wife we separated. And she went and lived with her mother, and I had my daughter. So it was just sort of a toss up of me. Daycare was my deal. I would send her to daycare sometimes. Sometimes I would send her with my mother. Sometimes with her other grandmother. But you know, I just I knew that there would. It seemed like there would be a way that I could stay home and do this full time. Although at the time, it was pretty much unheard of. I guess there were a few people doing it back then, but I mean, I knew that the stuff that I had seen at thrift shops, because like I said, I was a thrift shopper even back then and before. So I knew that there was things that I had seen in there that I had actually seen on eBay. When I was doing research, and I knew that I could pick things up pretty cheap there, and sell them on eBay. And it's pretty much what I did. And I remember the first couple of years. I mean, I had stuff stacked all over the house. I mean, it was everywhere.
I know that feeling.
We were a one bedroom, living in a one bedroom apartment, and I remember my entire dining room was devoted to my eBay pile. And it was all hard goods at the time. So my inventory system was basically digging through and moving everything out, trying to find what I had listed. So that's
So
sort of how it happened.
so that's how you transitioned into doing full time, and you've been doing full time for a long time now. And this is your, uh, pretty much your sole income is through eBay, or do you do any kind of other entrepreneur type endeavors?
Most everything that I do is on eBay. I also sell things, on Craigslist and OfferUp, bigger things, larger things. But I mean, I'll buy and sell anything. For a while, I bought and sold cars. I did consignments for a good while. I used to do a lot of consignments for uh, like antique shops and sort of hire and resale shops. I did that for a while. I got really into vintage electronics for a good while there because in the early days, I mean, you could find the vintage electronics everywhere, because people were donating it, and there's basically no value in it. So I did that for a good while. Um, but I've pretty much bought and sold everything, and even now, it's I would say probably 90% of my income is men's clothing, and vintage. Vintage clothing is really specialized, and that brings up a pretty good portion.
That's great. That's great. Now, I want to say one thing is you're definitely dedicated. When we talked about doing this interview, you went out today and purchased a headset and a webcam and everything. So that's true dedication, dude, for sure. And so will we seeing some live shows from you in the future in your YouTube channel?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I'm geared up and ready to go, man.
That's great. So anyways, you said you transitioned from hard goods to clothing, and that was one of the things that I noticed that I really appreciate about your channel is you have a lot of great information about shoes, clothing, and stuff like that. What was the transition from hard goods to clothing, and did you have any kind of background before then?
Um, well, for me, it was hard goods were what I did. I did a lot of sporting goods when I first started because I knew a lot about sporting goods, and they were pretty plentiful. Um, and what happened pretty much was we had what they call the bins now, the Goodwill bins here in Houston. We don't anymore because someone actually got stabbed there,
No
and
way.
yeah, right after that they shut it down. But
Jeez.
before that, it wasn't called the bins. It was just we called it the $1 Goodwill. It was the clearance outlet. It's pretty
Uh,
much what it was called. And once I found that place, I would go in there and spend 4 hours, 5 hours. I was sometimes the whole day in that place, just camped out, you know, and I would just do shoes, you know. And matter of fact, at the time, it was outside. It wasn't even inside a building. It was outside with dirt
No,
floors.
no kidding.
Yeah. And I mean, you would get in there and it was just like it is now, is from what I hear, it was like running with the bulls, but I would just grab shoes and they were $1 a pair. So, I would just, I mean, it was really a good a good way for me to learn, shoes. I would just grab every pair that I thought was valuable and throw them in my basket, and, figure out that night if they were good or not, and that's sort of how I got into shoes. And, I used to get all those old sneakers, all those old Nikes and, Jordans and all that stuff.
Yeah. I
But
actually watched a video where you were saying about how you were a true OG in the shoe hustle game, and I thought that video was very interesting because, you know, back in the day, I was in those days too, but I never looked at shoes, and there a lot of those things were plentiful, old Nikes and things like that. So back in the day, the old school bins, did they still charge by the pound? Is that how it worked?
no, everything was $1. So I mean, whether it was a shirt or a pair of shoes or a pair of pants, and then they had hard goods too. I mean, everything was a buck.
Wow. So
So
so it was a pair of shoes were like $1.
yeah, right, right.
Wow, that's fascinating. That's fascinating. So back on your channel, and which by the way, everyone who's watching, I have a link below to Philip's channel, The King of Thrift. It's a really good. I think it's like underrated for sure. And if you guys haven't heard of Philip, please subscribe to him. You won't regret it. It's amazing information. This is coming from me, from a guy who doesn't even watch any YouTubers really. And like I said, I do a bunch of hard goods and collectibles, and Philip definitely got a lot of information. So, so you're saying you do a lot of shoes and a lot of I know I loved your snapback video, because I think that's one of the things that over the last few years has really starting to take off. Do you want to talk about snapbacks for a second?
Yeah, snapbacks. Matter of fact, that video, like I said in the video, I had those snapbacks for about 10 years in that box, and I've only gone halfway through the box, but back in the day, I mean, you would find snapbacks everywhere, and I would just grab them because I mean they were so old. I'm just that kind of guy. I mean, if I see something old, I know that it's even if it doesn't have value today, I know eventually that it will. And I actually have inventory that I've held for years and years and years. Um, and believe it or not, a lot of those things have sort of come into their own here in recent years, kind of like snapbacks. But you know, I would just grab them. They were 75 cents, 50 cents, a buck or so. Um, and back then people really weren't that into them.
Yeah, I was gonna say, and I hate to interrupt you.
Mhm.
We used to think back in the day that they were trash because they literally no one was interested in them, and even back in the day, in the late '90s, early '90s, it was just like they were considered just like so just horrendous to even wear. No
Right.
one was wearing them. They weren't really fashionable at all. So pretty much people just discarded them and treated them as trash. So it's kind of ironic to find out, years later, that some of those snapbacks are really in high demand. And speaking of that, since you're knowledgeable about snapbacks, what should people be looking for when they're out there? Just as like something very simple for people to look at for.
For snapbacks, one of the really telltale signs as far as a really good snapback is going to have really good value, or those little stripes on the side of it. They'll usually have the three different colored stripes on the sides, and then it'll have a mesh, mesh on the back, the classic mesh with the little foam lining, and then if it'll always almost every time it'll say made in the USA, sometimes made in Korea. But you can look at those tags, and you could tell those old tags, from the newer and the remakes. And also, 9 times out of 10, they're not branded. They don't even have a brand name, or if they do, it's just some off the wall obscure brand that you've never heard of. You know, um, of course, the old team hats. Any of the teams, the sports, those old snapbacks. Those are the biggest money that you're going to get. The Astros are real hot right now. The old schools Astros hats.
Oh, I love that
Um,
logo. The like the bright orange and white.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and I mean they actually just until the last like year or so they weren't even the Astros hats weren't so big, but I guess they in the World Series and everything. So, but that's pretty much to look for, with those old snapback hats, trucker hats.
Yeah, it's my grandfather, who passed away like a few years ago, had a bag of snapbacks that he had a pretty good collection of them, and I just was able to get them like a couple weeks ago, and just going through some of those it was just really good memories, and to see like stuff that has pretty much been in a time capsule of like mint condition snapbacks that he like never used,
Oh
and
wow.
it's just really cool to so like your box like brought back that whole memories of me going through, because he's an old Air Force guy, so he had like kind of battleship ones, and lot of weird kind of like aviation ones, and those are really cool too. So definitely people look out for snapbacks. Don't they're I think they're really still underrated when you think about it, comparative to all the other things that people look out for. So let's
Yeah.
transition. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, sorry to interrupt you, but
Oh,
yeah, I was just gonna say, yeah, I mean, they are even like you said, they even right now they're still sort of underrated. They're just sort of coming in, and really rising in popularity right now. It's kind of why I did that video also. But also I heard you say the battleship hats, and and the old, you know, uh, the hats with the gold leaf on them.
yeah,
They actually call that scrambled eggs.
scrambled eggs. Yeah, I was just
Yeah,
gonna say that.
yeah.
My grandpa used to
Uh,
call them scrambled eggs.
right, right.
He used to laugh
Those are
at
good.
that. Yeah.
And then any of the really redneck hats, we got a lot of those out here in
Oh,
Texas.
like
You know, like Skull and
Skull. Oh my goodness.
Red Man, or I mean anything like that.
Even like
Even
Peterbilt and all the
Peterbilt.
like the Sylvester Stallone over the top,
Right,
like
right.
all those
Yeah,
dudes.
yeah, definitely. Yeah,
That's
all
so funny.
those. Yeah, the more redneck, the better.
Right, right. That's too funny. So let's talk about men's clothes. Like, what kind of stuff do you look for? Because this is actually good information for me, because I've tried to do clothes, and I can't deal with it. I can't deal with the sizes. I can't deal with the styles, all that stuff. So what do you look out for usually when you go looking for clothing?
I mean, for me personally, I don't deal with a lot of like just I don't do a lot of shirts. I'll do slacks, maybe a really nice pair of jeans. But for me, the main thing that I'm looking for is blazers, suits, sport coats. Um, Also, vintage. Anything pretty much vintage is also what I'm looking for. And I mean, the main reason is because I mean, you can go pick up maybe a Jose Banks, shirt, a button up or something. And I mean, you bring that home, and maybe it's plaid, maybe it's really nice. And down at the, at the retail store, it's going to cost you, I don't know, 25, $35. And online, there are so many of them, and the market is so saturated. I mean, you're going to be struggling to sell it for $8. People are giving them away for, I mean, I've seen them for like $3 or $4 free shipping, you know,
Right,
and I
right,
wonder what these people are doing. But I mean, if you look for vintage, I mean, you can find a vintage button-up shirt, similar style, but just because it's vintage, you easily get 25 for it, because it's the only one like that. It's the only one in that size and that style. So it just adds to as far as how rare it is, and supply and demand with that. Um,
right,
so and then I really sort of geared towards blazers and men's suits and that kind of stuff, just because it costs so much more. Yeah, those things are pretty timeless. I mean, suits don't change hardly at all over the years. And if you're picking up the good brands, Brooks Brothers and Armani, uh, you know J. Crew's a really good one right now. They've gotten really popular. Uh, but that's what I'm looking for, just because they hold their value so much better.
right,
But that being said, it's still it takes time to sort of build up a clientele, and you really got to build your inventory up. And I know a lot of new sellers are struggling with that issue. They'll let me know that they're buying all the right stuff. They're picking up the right blazers and suits and this and that, but their stuff's not selling. And I'll
right,
go and check their store and find out they've got 50 or maybe 150 items, which may or may not sound like a lot to some guys, but I mean it's not enough. You just really gotta ramp up to sell clothes. You really need
right.
a
So
huge selection.
you're basically saying there's an algorithm that eBay looks at for
Oh yeah,
people to kind
definitely.
of snowball. So you're saying like maybe your average sale price, maybe the amount of people looking at your items and the amount of inventory, plus all the other things like, 3 day shipping, next day shipping, and all that kind of stuff.
Right, right. Yeah, that definitely all plays into it. How long you've been doing it, how big your store is, all that stuff. So
Right. So you are the king of thrift. So do you do any kind of other kind of sourcing like garage sales and yard sales and estate sales or anything like that?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I mean, I've actually done. I mean, I've sourced. I mean, you can source anywhere. I've sourced. I did storage auctions for a good while, estate sales, garage sales. I'll still go to garage sales sometimes. But for me, I mean, it's all about the thrift shops. Just because this is Houston and we're pretty densely populated with thrift stores. I mean, there's no shortage of thrift shops around here. So, that's pretty much where I pick up most everything. Um, I will pick up some things from Facebook Marketplace, OfferUp. Here in the recent years, I mean, those things have gotten bigger, and it's gotten pretty easy to pick things up on there also. But I
Right.
still think the thrift shops is going to be your best bet. Just because you can go anytime. They're always getting so much new inventory in. So and the thing about those thrift shops is they take so much in, they get so many donations that they have to move it out, and whether even if it's good, they're still going to drop the price really low just to get it out the door, you know.
Right.
So you get really good deals that way, at the thrift shop. So
That's great. That's great. So around here, we have tons of thrift shops too, but I find like probably like my best finds are at yard sales and garage sales and stuff like that because every weekend I live in a dense area too, and there's in Southern California the weather's pretty good for the most part of the year, so there's like year round yard sailing and stuff like that. So I definitely understand, Texas could be hit and miss with weather and things. So I can understand where, going to the thrift stores. And you're right too, they're shuffling through inventory and stuff like that. So that's cool.
mhm.
Have you had, speaking of finds and stuff like that, have you ever found any really crazy items at a thrift shop? I mean, this could be like not like recent, but at all in your lifetime, maybe found like a really crazy home run item?
um, from the thrift shops, I mean, well, from the Goodwill, from the bins, from the clearance, whatever you want to call it. Back in my early days, I picked up a pair of dress shoes one time. And I remember picking them up. I had never heard of the brand. They were in pretty decent shape, and I looked at them and I tossed them back. I said, "No, those are no good." And I was like, "Well, what are you doing? It's $1. I mean, how can you not take a chance on $1?" So I
Right.
grabbed them, tossed them in the basket, and I got them home and looked them up that night. And I ended up selling those shoes for $900.
Wow.
And yeah, they were called John Lobs. I don't know if you've ever heard of them, but
No.
yeah, this guy's like the royal bootmaker to the queen. So
So were they
that
were they fancy like leather shoes or alligator shoes or were they something like that?
No, no, they were just leather shoes. Just they were a pair of wingtips,
Mm.
just lace up Oxford wingtips. So that was a pretty good sale. And another one of my biggest. This was probably my biggest home run ever, and this was actually at a garage sale. And I mean, this was a bad part of town. This yard sale I went to, and as a matter of fact, I drove by and I looked at it, and it looked so junky, man. I was like, I just drove past it,
There's
and
like
I was like,
stuff all over the floor, like all spread out, something like
I
that.
mean,
Yeah.
it was like a mud hole out front, man, and there was just stuff everywhere. And he had boxes of stuff. Just they were sealed in boxes and these junky looking, stacks of boxes. So I looped back around and I figured I'd go ahead and check it out. So I jumped out and I was, like I said, he had these stacks of boxes, these old boxes, and they were worn and weathered. And I was peeking in, trying to see what was in there. And I asked him if I could open them, and he was like, "No, no, you can't tear into them." He said, "But I'll give you all of them for $50." He said, "I don't know what they are. There's something in my nephew's." And he said that he had them for years out in his shed. And I looked in, and all I could see was some sort of it looked like some sort of equipment, metal
Right.
equipment. I was like, okay, I'll take them. So I load them all up. It was a whole truckload, and got them home, busted into them, and they were actually soda machines for your house, and they were like 50 style, and it had all the hoses and it had the guns and
Oh,
everything.
so it was like was it, but it was for your house. It wasn't for like a retail establishment because I know I've sold stuff like that before for actually retail.
No, it was actually for your house.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah, and it was like for ritzy people. And
Right.
I got into it, and anyways, I ended up selling each one of those for about anywhere from about $800 to $1,200 a piece,
Oh my
and
goodness.
I had 6 of them, and they were complete. So I ended up making like I think it was about $7,000 on 50 that time.
Oh my goodness. That is
Yeah, it was crazy.
crazy. That is crazy. Um, so we have to wrap this up just a little bit, and I'm sorry that there were some technical difficulties and everything before, but we're
Yeah,
gonna
it's
have
my
to.
fault, guys. Sorry
No,
about that. That was my fault, guys.
it's all good. Like, we're gonna do a part 2 of this as soon as possible for sure, because there's a lot of other things I definitely want to get into. So, everyone, I want to thank you for watching. Definitely go and check out Philip's King of Thrift. What do you call it? YouTube channel below. He's definitely got a lot of great information. I'm glad that you're all hooked up and everything sounds good and your webcam looks amazing. So we're definitely gonna have to do this in the future for sure, man. Because
Yeah, definitely.
there's a lot of stuff we just barely scratched the surface. So we're definitely gonna do this again, man.
Yeah, yeah. Look forward to it, man. Again, thanks for having me on. I appreciate it, man.
Yeah, no problem. Have a good one, man.
All right, you too.